By the time Peter realized the truth, love had already packed its bags and left their home. What was once laughter had turned into silence so heavy it could choke you. He sat in the dark that night, staring at the walls that had heard too many arguments and too few apologies. Mabel was in the bedroom, crying quietly, not because she wanted to, but because she didn't know what else to do. It wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, they were the kind of couple people admired. Two people who made love look simple. But love is never simple. It's a fragile thing that demands care, and when pride walks in, love quietly slips out. That night, Peter wanted to speak. He wanted to ask, when did we lose each other? But he didn't. And that silence was the final nail in the coffin of a marriage that had already begun to die. But stories like this never start with fights. They start with laughter. It began years earlier, on a day that meant nothing to the world, but everything to them. Peter wasn't the kind of man who attracted attention. He was quiet, thoughtful, always a step away from the crowd. He believed in peace, in order, in plans that made sense. Mabel, on the other hand, was light itself. She was the kind of woman who made people turn twice when she walked by, not because she was loud, but because she had that rare glow of confidence. When Peter first met her, she was arguing about something, passionately, fearlessly, as if the world needed to hear her opinion. He watched her from across the room, a smile creeping up his face. She wasn't perfect, but she was alive, and he hadn't realized how quiet his own life had become until she walked into it. He introduced himself clumsily, as men like Peter do when they meet women who unsettle them. But Mabel liked his awkward calmness. It felt safe. It felt genuine. They started talking, and somehow that conversation never ended. Weeks turned into months, and before they knew it, they were inseparable. Their love grew not through grand gestures, but through small, ordinary moments. A shared meal, late-night talks, laughter over something that wasn't even funny. The kind of moments that feel like forever when you're in them. Peter believed he'd found his peace. Mabel believed she found her partner. And for a while, they were both right. Everyone around them could see it. The chemistry, the warmth, the way they understood each other without words. Even Peter's friends would tease him. You better not lose that one, oh. Women like that don't come twice. He would smile and say, I know. But the problem with love is, it doesn't warn you when it starts to fade. It doesn't make noise. It just changes shape. When Peter proposed, it was quiet, simple, and sincere. Mabel said yes without thinking twice. She didn't need diamonds or fireworks. She just wanted him. The wedding was small, filled with laughter and prayers, the kind of day where everyone says, this one will last. And for a while, it did. They built their little home, filled it with dreams and plans. Mabel would tease Peter for his seriousness, and he would shake his head pretending to be annoyed. They had their disagreements, of course. Every couple does. But love always won, at least at the start. But somewhere between work, bills, and responsibilities, something began to shift. Mabel was restless. She wanted more. Not more love, but more life. She had ideas, business plans, ambitions. She wanted to start something of her own. Peter wasn't against it. He just wanted to be sure they were ready. He'd say, let's wait. Let's plan it properly. But to Mabel, wait sounded like don't. She started to see him differently. The man she once admired for his patience now felt like an obstacle to her dreams. And Peter, well, he started to feel like he was losing her to something he couldn't compete with. Love began to turn into negotiation. Every decision felt like a battlefield, every word a test. Yet they still smiled for the world. They still held hands at gatherings. They still said, "We're fine." But they both knew something was changing. And the truth about marriage is, it never breaks suddenly. It breaks slowly. One compromise, one unspoken resentment at a time. The first real crack came in the form of small choices that seemed harmless at the time. Mabel had always been ambitious, but now her ambition began to pull her away from Peter, even when he was right there. It started with late nights at work, excuses that sounded reasonable, and promises that were quietly broken. Peter noticed, of course, but he told himself it was temporary, a season of growth, nothing more. He told himself love was enough, that trust could bridge the small distance forming between them. But distance doesn't announce itself. It creeps in quietly. It settles in the spaces between shared meals, in the pauses during conversations, in the moments when laughter no longer reaches the eyes. Peter tried to speak up. He tried to ask gently about the late nights, the whispered phone calls, the extra hours Mabel spent away. But every time he did, she reassured him, smiled brightly, and convinced him it was nothing. And like the fool he was, Peter believed her. Mabel, on her side, was torn. She wasn't trying to deceive him out of malice. She convinced herself that she was protecting them both. She thought that if she could just make the right decisions, take the right risks, then one day he would see and understand. But the truth she didn't want to admit, not even to herself, was that keeping secrets, even small ones, changes you. It changes the way you see love, the way you see the person you love. It shifts the balance of a home until the weight becomes unbearable. Their first fight over this invisible tension came without warning. It was nothing at first, a small disagreement over money. Peter wanted to save, Mabel wanted to invest. Their voices were calm at first, measured, but then the old fear surfaced. The fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being ignored. Words were exchanged, each carrying weight the other hadn't anticipated. And then, silence. That cold, heavy silence that stretches from one room to the next. For days, they avoided each other. The house that had once been warm with laughter became a place of quiet observation. They moved like strangers, polite but distant. The small cracks that had begun forming now threatened to become chasms. Friends noticed, family noticed, and everyone, even Peter and Mabel themselves, feared the inevitable. Then came the first mistake, the one that would change everything. It wasn't an act of betrayal in the dramatic sense people expect from movies. It wasn't a shouting match, a secret affair, or a public humiliation. No, it was smaller than that, almost invisible to anyone who lived it. Mabel made a choice she believed was for the betterment of their future, a choice she thought Peter would eventually understand. She reached out for help, financial help, an outside investor to fund a project she had been nurturing quietly. On paper, it seemed reasonable. In practice, it was catastrophic. The problem wasn't the action itself, it was the secrecy. She didn't tell Peter. She didn't involve him. She thought she was protecting them both, giving him the luxury of surprise when it all worked out. But in doing so, she had built a wall between them, one brick at a time. And walls, once built, are heavy. They are cold. They do not whisper apologies. They do not bend for love. Peter found out by accident, as he often does in tragedies. A misplaced receipt, a casual comment from a friend, a tiny detail that revealed what he had not been told. And in that moment, the quiet fear that had been lurking in his chest exploded. He felt betrayed, not because Mabel had taken action. He could forgive ambition, but because she had taken action without him. Every late night, every whispered phone call, every small lie now became magnified, 1,000 times heavier than the truth alone. Mabel saw the shift immediately. She noticed the way Peter's eyes hardened, the way he spoke with clipped words, the way he withdrew. She tried to explain, tried to justify, but words were weak against the tide of disappointment and hurt he carried. For Peter, it wasn't just about the money or the project. It was about trust, the foundation of their love. And once that foundation cracked, even the strongest walls cannot hold up a house. From that day, their conversations became battles. Simple disagreements spiraled into arguments. Silence became punishment. The warmth they once shared was replaced with tension that neither knew how to soothe. Friends tried to intervene, family offered advice, but the chasm had grown too wide for casual remedies. Each apology was met with doubt, each reassurance was questioned, and in their hearts both of them felt the slow, crushing truth that love, no matter how strong, cannot survive alone without honesty. And yet, amidst all this, there were moments of tenderness. Peter remembered why he loved Mabel. Her laugh, the way she tilted her head when she thought, the small acts of kindness that had drawn him in years before. Mabel remembered why she loved Peter. His calm, steady presence, the way he could make her feel safe even in chaos, the patience he carried like a shield for both of them. But memory alone does not mend a fractured trust. Speculatively, we can see that this is where many marriages falter. It is not the grand betrayals that end love. It is the small missteps, the decisions made in isolation, the pride that prevents a simple confession. Peter and Mabel's story is universal because it is subtle, insidious, and achingly familiar. The first mistake is never the loudest. It is the one that whispers, unseen, until it has already done its work. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The house remained the same, but the people in it changed. They went through motions, breakfast together, evening walks, polite nods, but the connection had fractured. Every smile was weighed, every touch measured. Love was still there, yes, but buried beneath layers of hurt, hesitation, and fear. Mabel tried desperately to repair it in her own way. She offered explanations. She worked harder to show commitment. She smiled and tried to make the home feel alive again, but Peter's patience had been tested beyond measure. He listened. He nodded. He tried to understand, but a part of him had already withdrawn. And in that withdrawal, Mabel felt the sting of a distance she had never intended to create, but had no power to undo. By the time the next argument came, it was no longer about the initial mistake. It was about everything that followed. The pride, the miscommunication, the small resentment stacked like kindle. One word, one look, and the fire was set. For weeks they walked on eggshells, pretending for the world that everything was fine, while inside both knew it was anything but. And that is the cruel truth about mistakes in marriage. They are not single events. They are chains of choices, small and large, that link together until escape seems impossible. One moment, Mabel thought she was protecting their future. One moment, Peter thought he could forgive without understanding. And one moment later, they were trapped in a storm of their own making.